Hi, my name is Donovan Evans. Some people call me Foto Dono, or just Dono. I'm an award-winning photo artist, and I've got over 25 years of experience with making things with my camera. Lately, I've been obsessed with the Milky Way, around since 2016. The self-assignment photo challenge is basically, its primary goal is to inspire you to take more photos with subjects that might be outside your comfort zone. Now, you kind of might be thinking with words like assignment and challenge, they might be intimidating, but it's not. Don't panic. By exploring these new techniques and equipment choices, you'll increase your photography skills. These self-assignments are not a contest or a judged event. It's an opportunity to share and inspire each other. We'll be meeting online to go over the images in a round-robin discussion about the inspiration of the photo. We'll talk about the composition, the equipment, and everything else. I'll also review the editing process for my submissions as well, too. But if you want to find out more about me, you can go to @Fotodono on either Instagram or Facebook. You can also check me out on fotodono.com. If you'd like to be so kind, because I do these presentations out of my own pocket for stuff, and I do it for, and no one has to, you're more than welcome to drop me a donation on my tip bucket at paypal.me/Fotodono. I'm also the director of education over at Johnson Photo Imaging, where I teach a lot of photography classes. Like I said, thanks a lot, guys, for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. I hope you guys will enjoy a little bit of the presentation I got here. It shouldn't take too long, about 60 minutes or so. I want to thank everyone who's coming in. I know I had to change the dates a few times. Apologize for that. I had some family emergencies I had to take care of. So thank you very much for your patience and your understanding while we did that, while I was working through that. If you haven't noticed already in the meetup group, I've already posted the next one that's coming up. Oh, hey, Kevin, how you doing, man? So I was going to say, so yeah, I already posted the next one coming, and I'm going to title that one "Summer Heat." The way these things are supposed to work is to basically this. It's helpful if you guys can submit some photos. That way we can go over them, we can critique them, we can do a little bit of a bull session about what you thought how you can improve it. It doesn't have to be specifically towards that theme. It's just a fun little theme to try out. Basically, as one of the things that I've grown accustomed to is doing self-assignments. And self-assignments basically are just a way for us to kind of get better with our photography. You just basically pick something that you want to go take a particular theme or a particular effort. And the idea is what you should be picking or trying out is things that are outside your comfort zone, things that make you go, or things that you might have tried you haven't tried before. And the idea is that it's basically, it just gets you better and better for the growth as a photographer, if you're even a professional or if you're somebody who is just starting out or whomever. So again, I really like doing those things a lot. Now, as I said before, I didn't really get out too much to get some of my I didn't get out too much to get some of my self-assignments that I would like to have done for tonight. As I said, I had some personal family issues and crises I had to deal with in the meantime. But with all that said and done, Kevin, I think you missed the bit. We're going to jump into the pictures first, since I think you and I are the only one who have pictures up. So, yeah, you and I are the only have pictures up there. So if you want, we could dive in, and these guys can chime in if they want. But so far, it's just you and I. Is your mic work on your end?
I've been muted. We've got Bolts Hockey next door.
Oh, okay.
So I thought I might have been corrupting the stream or something, but
No,
okay,
no,
I'm
no.
unmuted now.
No, that's fine. So yeah, so I think what we're going to do is do something like we'll start off with the photos, and then I'll go into the presentation. I'm not sure where everyone here is on their level of expertise, Orlo, Roger, or Joe. As I said, we're going to talk a little bit about depth of field, and Kevin, of course, you're always more than welcome to chime in. So if you, like I said, the idea is to try to hopefully talk a little bit about that, and also talk a little bit about maybe trying to work on our own craft of our photography and do some stuff like that. Yeah. All right. Oh, got another latecomer. All right. Welcome, Joyce. Thank you for joining. All right. Let me go share my screen here. All right, so we should have the meetup page right here. And that's the only ones I've seen. I think those are yours, aren't they, Kevin?
Yes.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in there. Kevin, these things are, I really enjoy your work. You do a fantastic job, I think. And I was really taken aback when I first took a look at some of the pictures that I saw. I especially love the butterflies. I know how annoying they can be when they never stand still. But I really love the transitions you got between the extreme amount of depth of field between these pictures right here. And now it looks like you're just using everything on, you got the D610, right?
Yeah, it's the D610, and actually, I think they're all shot with the 105 macro lens.
Is that the Nikon?
So that's ordinary. That's going to give you shallow depth of field automatically.
Right.
In fact, that's a problem more than a virtue.
Yeah, that's one of the things you gotta work with when you're dealing with depth of field, especially the closer you get, the depth of field just keeps shrinking and shrinking.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is a cactus outside my house.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife had seen a dragonfly the night before. So I was sent out to shoot it again. The dragonfly wasn't there, but it was sunrise. So we had some nice, side light on this cactus. And so these spines just stood out. And the only thing I can say is I framed it so that the spines would be backgrounded by the light yellow. So this is dark green and light yellow cactus. And then I went to black and white. But yeah, there's, again, because of the macro, there's a lot of fall off really fast. So up in the upper left corner and even down in the lower right, there's a lot that's out of focus and a little bokeh there.
Yeah. But yeah, I just love the transitions, because one of the things that that a lot of photographers don't work on as much, as at least the ones I see that come into the store sometimes, is they don't work on a layered environment. They need to work on background, midground, and foreground. And when they work on that type of level of composition, they get some much more fascinating photos as a result of it. And you always seem to have that pretty much in a nutshell. You seem to be doing pretty good with that.
Yeah. And it, what's helped me in a weird way, in Brooklyn, Maine, where we spend 8 weeks every summer, we have a little camera club, and we're on Flickr. So I see a lot of images every day, and you start to see what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
So it really helps looking at other people's images, I think, in both ways. I see things to aspire to, and things I say, man, that's just not working. So it's helped a lot just doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, you got some great use of the lines and stuff. Again, I just really love, especially how the values play. You'd have to do too much tweaking with the values, did you?
I'd have to go back and look. I may have done a little dodging and burning,
right,
but not much.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get everything as close to in camera as possible. Now, again, because they're raw images, they have to be processed to some degree.
Right.
But I try to get the light right and the focus right, obviously. And so I don't think I did very much to this image, except converted it to black and white.
Right. Well, when you shoot, are you deliberately thinking about black and white when you went to shoot this, or you?
In this one, yeah, and yes, and I'm seeing the image more. I'm seeing the final image when I'm shooting.
Right.
So I'm looking at this and thinking, I want this to be black and white because I see these black spines against this pale yellow background. So I'm thinking it's going to be a high contrast shot, and I'm not worried too much about, I don't want to blow out the highs, but I'm thinking high contrast, black and white when I'm shooting it, just to make sure that so maybe on this I'm up a third of an exposure or something like that. I'm not doing anything crazy, but I am thinking black and white.
That's cool, man. Like I said, I really like that one a lot. That was really cool. But of course, like I said, butterflies are the bane of my existence. I've been to butterfly farms or butterfly conservatories or whatever you want to call them, and it's always like it's like it's almost pure luck sometimes when you get the perfect shot.
Well, and that's the other thing is you have to take lots of shots. So you put it on burst.
Yep.
And you take 200 shots and you got 3 keepers. That just goes with the territory. Dono, have you been? Because I'm looking for more species besides the monarch.
Right.
And I understand that the Sarasota Garden Club has a butterfly garden, the place that's like on 8th Street and
right.
Tamiami North.
Yeah.
I'm going to go. I've never been there. Have you been there?
No, I've not been there myself. I've been to that little garden they got down at the Selby, stuff like that.
Yeah,
we got a fairly decent garden at our house where we get. It's mainly a lot of the yellows and greens and stuff like that. But of course, a bunch of monarchs. I haven't seen too much of a different species in this area. I know that they got a butterfly conservatory up in Gainesville, which supposedly has hundreds of species throughout the year.
Well, that might be because I'm seeing I follow some guys who do butterfly stuff. Yeah. One guy's in Brazil, and these amazing exotic butterflies that show up, and they're fantastic. Yeah. This is in Thuya Gardens. This is in Mount Desert Island, which is Acadia National Park in Maine. So this is a beautiful little botanical garden, and it's full of butterflies and pollinators.
Uh-oh. Hey, Kevin, I don't know if you can hear, but your audio dropped out. Or at least on my end, it dropped out. You still there?
And then the colors of the butterfly against the flower, and they're kind of playing off each other.
Oh, Lord. Hey, Kevin, if you're talking, I can't hear you right now.
And I couldn't hear you for about 30 seconds either.
Yeah, it dropped. I got a signal that says my internet's unstable. It's okay. I think I need to take it to the funny farm.
But and I think a lot of these shots, you have to look for them, as you know, Dono. I mean, You know all this. But on the other hand, there's a certain amount of serendipity about these things. You have to come back with a couple of hundred images, and then you find the 10 that you're going to look at and work on and pick one. So I got lucky with this.
Now, were you planning out where you were going to shoot and just hope for the butterfly to land?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this place, and this is also where the next photo comes from. So it's a beautiful little botanical garden. This I didn't this you can't do anything. You're just shooting. You can't modify anything here. But the butterfly was there, and I probably shot for 5 minutes. But you want to, for everyone else, keep shooting. Don't take the first shot. Keep shooting,
Right.
and something will turn up because
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a Flickr. What do they call it? Explore page. They picked it up, so I was very proud of that.
Well, it's a lovely shot. Again, a great use of composition, especially with the line leading to the butterfly. And I know that the depth of field was kind of probably a little bit, you probably had a fight with it a little bit there, but you captured it beautifully. And it's,
And if anyone is shooting macro, I think this is probably F8. So in macro, your problem is that your depth of field is too shallow.
right.
So if you're F8, you'll get like the beak of the bird and the wingtip in focus. And don't worry about the background; it's going to be blurry. Now, if you have an 85 millimeter lens, it's going to be different. But if you're shooting macro, you're going to get all the bokeh in the world. So make sure F8, push the shutter speed up, and don't be afraid to push the ISO up, because all those programs now can take a lot of the noise out of your images. So 1600 ISO is not a problem anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's with especially with AI Topaz and some of the new Photoshop software and everything else that's coming out, you could be shooting 10,000, almost 12,000 ISO.
Yeah, that's with the good cameras. So I have an ancient camera. So if I get up above 3,200, it really starts to look terrible. But I'm using the Topaz. They had a nice at Christmas. They had a nice sale. I bought the package.
That's cool. So again, you guys, Roger, Joe, Joyce, if you guys got any questions, you're more than welcome to chime in. If you can't, hang on a second. Everyone's welcome to chime in.
Topaz. I'm not sure, but I may have run this through because I'm sure I'm at least 1600 ISO on this one.
All right. Let's go on to the next one here that you brought in. So yeah, so this was like your settings right there. So if you guys want to, you can go to the meetup page, and basically you're looking for the Bradenton photo group, and you can actually see some of the settings that he was using on some of this stuff. And one of the things that I've been trying to at least emphasize with some of these sessions is trying to get everyone to kind of like think about posting the settings, because the settings themselves, they're just a guideline. They're not some hard, fast rule that these are the settings you have to use to get shots like this or however you want to do it. These are just guidelines for someone who's just starting out or somebody who's looking to see how, like say Kevin did this one. It's kind of helpful to know. It's helpful to know where you're with the lighting, because again, these are all the things you think about. So if you're looking for a creative, a constructive criticism, as it were, sometimes it's nice to know some of this stuff in the back, so that way you can ask the right questions if that's the thing that you need to do, or if Kevin wants to ask the right questions, that'd be the thing he would do, and stuff like that. All right, so again,
Don, what is these things I can't get coherent, but so what is the main thing here? So in a shot like this, you're not worried too much about your shutter speed, but you're worried about your aperture, and you'll make up for it with your ISO. So it's things like that. What's predominating in a scene.
right.
Now I'm hand holding, so I can't be oblivious to my shutter speed because I'm shaky. So if I blow like 1/400th, it's not going to look very good.
Right.
This one though, I was pleased with because this is high noon. This is like 2 p.m. And again, to everybody about shooting flowers is don't shoot them at high noon in
Yeah.
bright, harsh sunlight. They look awful. So either you find them in some shade.
Come on, internet. What's going on here?
And your shadows are better, but it's terrible to go out in the middle of the day and just start shooting flowers in that midday sun. Unless it's you're going for a psychological statement or something about that. So this,
Right.
I think, is the handheld diffuser. And I'm probably not, I may be like, you can see what it is, Dono. Maybe I'm 5.6 or something.
Looks like it was 2.8. It looks like I can't hear you. My audio keeps jumping out on me.
Image separation. And I really saw that purple against the yellow when I was shooting this.
Yeah.
That's what I was going for in the field.
Well, again, like I said, I really enjoy your work, and again, it's see, I know you put a lot of thought to some of these things, or you've got enough experience to kind of like jump around and play with the composition and get some really interesting results. I think, again, I love the detail that you got in there. That's really nice. You got all these repeating patterns with the flowers because flowers are round, but different shapes, obviously, with the angles in the back. Again, this is a lovely use of dealing with all that stuff, and it really looks like it almost looks like the pink flowers kind of floating on a boat,
Yeah,
soft background of yellow.
yeah. It's kind of got a graphic feel to it. It
Right.
almost looks like you layered this one on the other. And that was accidental. I couldn't see that looking through the viewfinder, but I was lucky.
That's cool, Kevin. Well, does anybody have any questions for Kevin? Nope. All right, we're going to jump to mine then. Just one second. Let's see, where is it at? Here we go. So some of these I basically am using some that I pulled from the last session. So I don't know if anybody was at the last session, but like as I said, I didn't really have an opportunity to go out and do some additional reshoots or anything like that for the self assignment because of certain things and what was going on. But I felt like this took again advantage of some of this stuff and dealing with depth of field, dealing with transitions. This one was shot really, really close. You could see it was at f3.2. It's again like Kevin was doing. It was shooting really, really bright daylight. This was probably about 11:30 or something like that. So it was getting close to high noon. And so I'm getting lots of right. You can see though, there's some highlights that were kind of lost, unfortunately, but it worked out all right. Hang on one second. You can see right there, I lost some of the bit in there as far as that goes, but to me, I was going for more of a stark look between the transition with the road, with the rows, and almost giving like not quite rundown feel of the whole thing, but that was the general.
It's got this hard.
That was around 9:47 a.m. That's what it was. All right. I can't hear anybody now again. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, and I lost you, Dono. So
it's fun. I love the internet. So sorry, guys. Like I said, I'm recording this anyway, so I'll be able to kick back on this later on, and hopefully you guys will be able to hear it later. So on this particular one right here, you guys hear me? Can you hear me, Kevin?
I can hear you now.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So on this particular one, I'm actually I'm focusing all the way towards the back of this particular piece. Again, I'm trying to use the composition with lines leading it into it and stuff like that. Now, what you see around the outside, what I did with it is I just basically created this frame to put around it that replicated the whole piece to kind of like push you into the whole thing. Again, to make it more friendly for social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea behind the whole entire thing was to try to get the sun, see the sun set underneath the Venice fishing pier. So I had, again, but I wanted to try to keep as much of the foreground as sharp as I could, but I'm focusing as far as I can towards infinity. And I am at on a micro 4/3 at 75 millimeters. So if you're shooting full frame, that's approximately 150 millimeters. But regardless, I'm trying to keep as much of this transition in there as possible. Some of it gets kind of washed out in there, but it's not too bad. And I kind of like it. I love the texture of the whole entire thing. This is what I was trying to go for when I got it. When this particular moment, there was the cloud bank right there. So the sun was only there at that point. Then it was gone behind the clouds. So
Yeah.
that was the only one I got a chance to get to that particular one.
But I like the partial diffusion through the clouds of the sun. Yeah.
I did a cropped version of this, or no, I did at 100 and I did it. I think it almost at 150 millimeters on a micro 4/3, and I think it was you could see it a little bit better on it, but I don't think I put that in this display. I don't think I did. Did I? Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this is at 300 millimeters. So I shot one very far, same distance. I'm standing, of course, so you can see where the clouds right there. It's just pulling out. But the lens is get a little bit of chromatic difference. But again, you're dealing with the bright sun, and you can see I'm still shooting really fast. The aperture is still at 6.7, and I'm stopping most of the water as well. So it worked out pretty well. The key was waiting for the waves to rack up so the sunlight would be coming right through the waves at the same time through the spray. So that was really kind of cool to see too.
And Dono, I think that if you're shooting into the sun, anything goes. You want lens flare. It's all going to be expressionistic at this point. So,
yeah, exactly.
So don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's very.
So that was like under the vent pier. But again, I'm trying to deal with the transition, get people go through the whole entire stuff. Now on this one, however, I did something a little bit different. On this one, you can see the shutter speed is at 1/25 of a second. I wanted to get some motion blur of the water, but I didn't want to blur it out completely. But the transition on this one was actually, I cheated, well, not cheated. I created a focus stacking picture. So this way I'm focused here, then I focus a little bit down there. So that way it keeps it fairly sharp and consistent all the way through, especially with the pylons leading you down through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So the idea was I only shot 3 photos to create the stacking picture, and all the exposures are pretty much exactly the same. All I'm doing is I'm just racking and stacking them as they go through there.
Yeah.
I'm shooting everything at 25 millimeters. Yeah.
So, yeah. Sometimes maybe you're hand holding, right?
Or no, this was actually in a tripod on the ground at this particular point.
Yeah. So maybe you bracket it and you because I think you could have gone slower. I think you could have dragged the shutter more. It's your work. I mean, I'm not, but for me, I could see more of a creamy look on that water. And again, some guys hate that look, but it just like we bracket exposures. You can go out there and bracket.
I don't know if you can hear me again. I know you're talking because the screen lights up. So I'm hoping it gets recorded on the other end there. Can you hear me again?
No, now I can hear you. Yes.
So I think my internet keeps jumping in and out.
It's almost like every 2 minutes it goes out for 15 seconds.
Yeah, something like that.
Periodic to me, but Who knows?
So, well, anyway, well, thanks, Kevin. I'll when I try this again, I'll probably do it again and see what I can come up with. The Venice is looking for as a contest there, so but they want horizontal 2:3, 2:3 aspect ratio pictures. So I'm
Oh,
gonna have to
that's
go up and reshoot it. Well, they put it in a calendar, so they want
Oh, okay.
to be horizontal.
Okay.
All right, so let me back up to this for the presentation now. Now, I didn't see any pop up in the chat, so I'm going to kind of start up here from the beginning and kind of work my way through it and just go from there. As I said before, my name's Donovan, or some people call me Dono. Sometimes they call me Foto Dono. Again, if the audio drops out, just be patient. It'll pick back in. So I'm part of I work at Johnson Photo Imaging. And if you want to find out more about what I do and how I do stuff, you can always check me out on social media at Foto Dono and fotodono.com. Right now, I've been doing a lot of, well, recently I haven't done too much right now, but lately, but in the previous couple of years, I've been doing a lot of Milky Way photos. You'll see that's why I got the star trails behind me and stuff like that. So if anybody feels, feels the urge to help me put some food on the table, because otherwise, my son gets hungry. If he gets hungry, he wants to start eating things, and sometimes he wants to eat something like me. So again, if you guys want to do that, that'd be awesome. You can always use the tip jar I've got there as a QR code, or you can go to my website and do that there as well too. Just go under classes and workshops, and you'll see the tip jar there. So on this particular picture and stuff like that, when I'm talking about for dealing with depth of field and stuff like that, oops, hang on one second. There it is right there on the class pages right there, sorry. And the store also has some class pages as well too. So again, this is mainly for their stuff, so you can see some of what's going on and upcoming things of that nature. And again, you can follow the store as well here too. I also moderate the low light photo group as well too. So if you guys are interested in that, we'll be doing a session in May, and you can always check that out. It's gonna be like May 24th, I believe, a Tuesday. And if you happen to be in the area, Johnson Photo Imaging is doing their trade-in event June 10th and 11th. So if you guys are interested in that, please stop on by. We'll be glad to help you out. Bring in your old gear, get some new gear. That's basically how it works out. So as I said before at the beginning, I want to talk a little bit more about the aperture or depth of field primarily, and how you can modify it and make some changes and do some stuff like that. So for those of you who are not familiar with depth of field, with the concept and stuff like that, basically depth of field is basically the distance between the nearest and furthest objects that are sharp in focus. Think of it as like you're focusing on something, and then there's a bubble of focus that surrounds them. So the focus plane, when that's parallel to the lens, is going to be in focus, but everything behind it and in front of it is the depth of field. It's modified a little bit with the aperture rating. So the smaller the aperture, the narrower the depth of field, the bigger the one, the wider the depth of field. Of course, less light come through here and you can get more light through there. So for instance, like this, I'm about 3 feet away on this particular picture, and we're shooting, and I just basically changed the aperture rating to 2.8 to f2.2. And you can see right here, there's a significant difference between the depth of field on both of those. And when you crop up into the picture, you can see it even more pronounced. And what's happened here, this one's get more of a better representation of what, pointing your eye to this. So when you're trying to work with depth of field, what you're trying to do is you're trying to point your subject or point the viewer toward your subject. Depth of field can be a very useful tool for that. Here, the subject gets kind of washed because even though that's softer in the background, it gets kind of blends in a little bit still. Here, it's really sticking out right there. So that's kind of nice, and it works that way. Now, keep in mind, distance also plays an effect for all this stuff too. So I'm basically shooting these at the same depth of field. And what happens is when I'm focusing on the steering wheel, and if you look at the front of the car, you could see with the distance right there, even though the exposure is identical, just by changing my distance, the depth of field, the front of the car is not as sharp. I get a lot of these questions all the time about how can I make my pictures sharper? And the reason being that a lot of the times your pictures aren't as sharp is because of this. It's depth of field. It's usually motion blur or depth of field. It's about 85% of everything that I see all the time when people are asking me about sharp pictures. It's depth of field and motion blur. Being able to modify that or correct it. Being able to modify that or correct it is usually one of the things when I'm not corrected, but to modify it to make it more pleasing or palatable or whatever you're trying to do in that particular picture. So again, zooming up on the section, you can see that there's a significant level of clarity between these two images just by the distance alone. Now, if you really want to see this kind of work out, you can go to there's tons of simulators online. I like this guy because it's basically free. Yeah, there's cookies and whatnot, but it's basically free. If you want, you can give him a cup of coffee as well too. But the idea, it's a kind of nice little way to kind of plan out if you're going to go out and do a shot, and so you get a visual understanding of how the depth of field is going to play out in your particular shot. There are other apps out there on their phone, like Photo Pills, things like that. But this is, again, a free thing you can do. Again, you can't, I haven't really tried it on mobile devices, but I usually do it on my laptop. And it usually, again, I only use it really just to kind of give me an idea, a guide. It's not something I go out there and try deliberately. I'm just trying to, if I'm trying to plan out a shot, I'm just trying to figure out how much I want in the background to kind of tweak the picture. The other thing too is you got to remember you're dealing with expansion and compression quite a bit. So you can see what the lens sees in the yellow box, and by cropping and scaling the picture to fit, you can see that there's a significant difference in what's happening in your background. Hang on one second. So remember, distance and f-stop modify the depth of field. So changing your field of view changes the emphasis on the depth of field quality. So if your depth of field is narrow and you're zooming in on your subject, you're basically bringing the outside of the depth of field closer toward your subject. The blurry portion closer to the subject. I do this quite a bit, especially when I'm dealing with portraits or other subject matter where, when I basically step back and I zoom in, and that way I get some interesting things. Now, expansion and compression, again, in a nutshell, the wider the angle, the field of view, the more you're going to get, the smaller the background appears to be, which is a pretty obvious statement because the background at super wide angles looks really, really, really small. But as you start zooming in, of course, you're bringing that distance closer and closer to you. Now, every time I zoom, I'm requiring the focus. So basically, where I change my focal length, my field of view, I'm requiring my focus. And when I do that, then again, I'm just trying to emphasize that I'm zoomed in all the way. I have not changed my position where I've shot this. I'm basically zooming further in. I'm bringing the background closer to me. Now, what I did on this next set is I basically used aperture priority. And I'd wanted my aperture to pretty much be consistent for these next couple of shots. So if you haven't used aperture priority, or if you have Canon aperture value, you can put the camera there and you can set your own value for aperture. Keep in mind, you can also do this in manual too, but I didn't really care about shutter speed or ISO. The camera could have a field day with that as far as I was concerned, but it pretty much stayed consistent through most of the shooting. But because again, I'm shooting outside, cloud cover and stuff like that for some of these next shots. So again, to emphasize expansion and compression. So what I'm doing is if you look right here, I'm about this far away from my son as I'm trying to photograph him in the parking lot of Clinghamdone and Smoky Mountains. Watch here, not too much is changing over here as far as that goes, because every time I back up, you can see I'm zooming in just a little bit, trying to keep him the same width inside the frame. And as I keep backing up, you see how I'm zooming in, you see how close the background gets to him. And by doing this, I can create a much more emphasized look with the transition with the depth of field by bringing that autofocus area closer and closer to my subject. Now, this is not the most sexy picture of him right here. We got the garbage can and we got the car to the left and stuff like that. But it works out pretty well for, once you've got the idea of how it works, then you can use it a lot more creatively. And therefore you can step back and zoom in. Here, even though I've shot this at 150 millimeters, I'm actually now changing my distance and trying to emphasize a little bit of the foreground in there. But you can see I'm shooting an f/18. The reason why I'm still shooting f/18 in all these pictures is because I'm trying to make sure the mountains aren't too soft. Because if I go down all the way to 2.8, now he looks like a teeny tiny toy on top of the fence. Well, again, that could be fun if that's what you're trying to do. So again, what I'm trying to do, when I'm emphasizing, when you're playing around with your depth of field, you're trying to make these changes and make these emphasize for all this stuff. Think about what you want to put in the picture. Think about how you want your subject to be relating to the background. Lots of photographers have said this over the years, Sam Abel, Ansel Adams, Clyde Butcher. Think about the background, think about your midground, think about your foreground. This is my subject, so there's not much in the way in the foreground except for air, so this is the background. I have to break this into layers. I've got the cloud layer, I've got the mountain layer, and I've got this layer, and he kind of breaks into the layer right there. I'm working the composition in this particular picture. I'm following through, trying to create hopefully an interesting portrait of my son within the beauty that is the Smoky Mountains. Again,
and they say you're looking for subject separation,
right,
from the background. And the question is, how much do you need to do that? That's an aesthetic choice.
Exactly. There's no right or wrong answer for either of the images. This is just a pure aesthetic choice. Uh-oh. I disappeared again. There we go. I think I'm back again.
Yeah, you're back. Good.
All right, cool. Thanks, Kevin. So when I'm dealing with portrait and landscapes and stuff like that, you can think of the scene modes. The scene modes try to get you shots like this, but really, they don't really get you as good as that. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But you got to remember, the portrait mode is dealing with distance, your field of view, as well as your aperture. You're choosing the field of view, you're choosing the distance. The camera in portrait mode can choose the aperture rating. So again, you're trying to create separation from the background and the subject matter. So that way you get some interesting results by, again, playing with the softness of the background in order to get some shots with there. Again, I use a telephoto lens quite a bit to help me emphasize this separation. The telephoto is really anything above what they call the normal field of view. And that varies depending upon the sensor. But when you're dealing with the full frame cameras, that would be anything above 50 millimeters. Anything below that is considered wide angle, generally, as the rule. But again, I like to step back and zoom in to give myself a nice separation of the subject matter. Again, using a really fast lens, you get the same thing like I did before with my son. You get the really sharp, but we're really about 3 feet away from her. So at this particular point, you can see that the depth of field is so narrow because we've gotten so close to her. Not only is the background so soft, there's the separation is just, the depth of field is crept into the subject matter. But again, it's not an unpleasant picture.
And Dono,
Yeah.
her eye and the bird's eye are almost in the same focal plane.
Exactly. And that's
you get away with 2.8. But if you've got 2 people and one guy's 6 inches behind the other, 2.8 ain't going to cut it. So I found out early on that don't shoot wide open. I like to have at least all of the subject in focus.
Right.
And sometimes if you need more blurring of the background, you can go more telephoto. So you can stay f4, but go to 200 and move back 15 feet and shoot it and still get a lot of blurring of the background there. So
Exactly.
that's,
Yeah,
by the way, that's a great shot. Whoever,
yeah. Yeah, I can't take credit for this. This was shot by one of the Tamron guys, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, because again, you're dealing with the focal plane. So wherever the focal plane is, you have to deal with the depth of field as well. Again, this is shot with a crop sensor at 400 millimeters, and you can see that he's got a nice tight crop shot of this kid, of his subject matter, and you can see how soft that background is. And even though it's an f13, you can still see a little bit of bokeh going on the background. Got to remember, bokeh is just really a way to represent, is just the way the light's coming through the aperture. If you had a bigger aperture, the bokeh would be much bigger, of course, but since it's really teeny tiny, and since there's such a dramatic contrast difference, you can still see a little bit of the bokeh in the background. Distance also will modify that as well. So again, whether you're using the scene modes or landscapes, all this stuff can be modified dramatically, not necessarily by changing the aperture as much as changing your field of view and the distance from your subject to create the effect that you're looking for. So regardless of whatever you're trying to do, just pay attention to how the field of view is going to change your emphasis in the picture. So with wide angle shots, this was a good example of from Ken Hubbard, is again, one of the Tamron guys. You can see he's got a really interesting view of the mountains there, but now he's trying to create an emphasis with the plants in the foreground to get a much more interesting appeal to the composition. Again, this is all an aesthetic choice, but you can see he's also created, again, working with layers. You got the mountains, you got the water, and you got the plants. It's a nice little separation of layers, working the composition. And it really doesn't matter if this was on landscape scene or not, because if he's choosing f22 to shoot this thing, he's basically trying to make sure everything where he's focused on here, as much as this is going to be in the shot.
Yeah. Dono, just for the audience in general, what are you focusing on in that shot?
Well, in the mountain shot or this shot?
Yeah. Not the mountains, right?
No, not the mountains. You got to remember too, with a wider angle, with a wider field of view, you can get away with a much softer background, generally speaking, because it's so far away. Everyone's already going to accept that it's going to be slightly softer.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be tack sharp.
Yeah.
Again, here I'm playing around in this particular shot. I'm playing around with compression on this particular one. These trees are all pretty much the same size, even though they're just a different distance within the picture. And since I'm compressing, the background is close to the foreground with this shot, then that's what I'm doing. Now it says 40 millimeters.
It looks like a state hospital or something.
Yeah, I don't remember. This was next to the Mississippi River in Tennessee, I think is where it was.
Okay. It's very nice.
No, thanks. But you got to remember, this was, even though it says 40 millimeters here, I'm shooting with a micro four thirds for this picture. So this is technically at 80 millimeters for full frame users. Now we're shooting micro four thirds. The aesthetic compression gets a little bit of a boost because of that, because again, you think you're shooting maybe a little bit wider, but you're really not. You're shooting a little bit tighter, things like that. Now pictures like this, you can use like a telephoto to help you create sometimes a panoramic. So if you only have one lens and you need to shoot a wide shot and you can't do it, you can always do it what I call panoramic, and you do some stitching work on that. I talk a little bit more about that in the editing, but the idea is when you're doing pictures like that, you got to kind of line everything, not line it up as much, but overlap about 40% each of the areas. And then when you stitch together, there's a little bit of cleanup work you got to do, but you get a much more interesting result for that particular picture. I couldn't back away any further because I didn't have a very wide angle lens for the shot, but I wanted to get the whole thing and the ground in there. If I keep walking back and zooming in, the issue is I run out of space to walk. So I got to find a happy medium. So again, I'm dealing with depth of field and transitions and stuff. Again, if you're using like the macro mode on your camera, you got to remember the macro mode is not dealing with true macro. It's just basically trying to tell the camera you're trying to get as close as you can to focus on something. And if it can, may modify the depth of field. Sometimes it doesn't do that for you. But the idea is you got to remember your lens controls how close you can get to things. It's always written on the lens somewhere, or it's in the manufacturer specs about what they call the minimal focus distance. How close can you get with this lens? Putting it in macro mode does not mean you can get really close. Lenses like a macro lens will allow you to get much closer. This is what I call my behind the scenes photo. Get it?
All right.
Now I say that was the one joke for the evening.
Yeah, you got me.
And then of course there's what they can do, what called macro filters. And what that is just like putting like a pair of readers or a diopter on front of your lens that cuts the distance between it. But you take some sacrifice. The image is not as sharp and you cut down the depth of field. Since you're so close, your depth of field is very minimal. So your subject is going to bounce in and out of that little plane of focus.
I would put in a bid. I bought a used macro lens years ago. The first used lens I bought. Can you hear me, Dono?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. And I bought it on Amazon of all things. And it looks like but it was a Nikon 105 millimeter, probably $150. It's the lens I use day in and day out. And I have gotten more pleasure out of that macro lens, shooting either studio stuff in the house or outdoors. Anyone who's at all tempted to do those things, I can't think of a better additional lens to buy than a macro. And the longer the millimeters, the more working distance you'll have. So 105 millimeters, you can get a foot away from the B. If you're 60 millimeters, you might have to be 6 inches up to the B. Yeah. But I have gotten so much pleasure out of using that lens. So I'd go to Johnson Photo Imaging and see what they got.
So when you're shooting action stuff, if you're trying to play with action, typically the reciprocal end of it, if you're putting it on shutter priority, you typically have to have the aperture open up, especially if you're going to shoot the shutter speed at extremely fast speeds. But you could also, of course, bump up the ISO if you want to. Now the ISO is really low, so the camera has to go to at least 2.8. Again, it was fairly bright out. It worked out well. This one's one of the more lucky shots because I was shooting the sun and the bird happened to be flying in and I just basically caught it there as quickly as I could. I just basically quickly dialed the shutter speed as fast as I could to stop the bird because I was already shooting at the sun with that type of stuff, through some reeds and stuff like that. But you can see right here, this is a shallow depth of field on this particular one, but you can see how soft the background is. If I'm hand holding it, it's got lots of motion blur in this particular picture. And you can see, even though the bird looks like he's fairly sharp right there, but he's not, because again, the limbs are moving, lots of motion blur again. So again, you guys got to pay attention to how it is. I personally like stuff like this. I think it works really well. It gets kind of a nice little painterly effect in the background, which is what I like.
And those who don't want their blur, just push the IS.
Right. Yeah.
What over 400th, there's blur in it. So I'm always pushing my shutter speed way up fast. But I like that ibis very much, that glossy ibis. That's a good shot.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, this is a great shot.
No, thanks. So again, I'm shooting this at as slow shutter speeds, and actually I'm using an external flash to help light for this area right here. But I can't use full power on the flash. I have to basically dial the flash down so I don't blind them as they come across here. So I got a little bit of light hitting the girls, but I'm shooting this deliberately at 1/30th of a second to get more motion blur. And if I follow the girls, even though they're not sharp, they're sharper than the rest of the image. So again, I'm trying to work with the layers and again, using again, even though the background is still kind of inside the depth of field a little bit, but you got much more of a hazy effect as I'm panning through the whole entire shot.
That's a great image, Dono. I love that.
So again, when you're shooting with portraits and you're trying to manage the depth of field and trying to get something that's pleasing to your eye, the effective focal lengths that you see a lot of photographers use is anywhere between 85 to 135. Again, you step back and move around and stuff like that, and you just basically choose an f-stop that's pleasing for the particular picture. Did I write it down here? I don't know. Hang on one second. Yeah, this was at 5.6 for this particular one right here. All right, where am I at? There we go. Hit play.
That's a good aperture. You know,
Yeah.
the nose, the eyes, and the ears are going to be in focus usually at 5.6. So,
Right, exactly.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
It's very
So
nice.
again, it's just playing around with the depth of field, trying to get. Now, keep in mind that 85 to 135 is just a guide. It's not something that's set in stone. You can shoot your portraits at any focal length. You'll hear the term, "Oh, this is a great portrait lens." And really, it's just any lens is a great portrait lens. It just depends on how you use your stuff.
I have heard I don't want to monopolize things here, but Dono, I have heard that more guys are leaning towards 50 and even 35 because it's an iPhone look and people are used to seeing selfies shot at normal to slightly wide angle, and it's a look now. So there's in some quarters a movement away from the 85 millimeter even.
Yeah, exactly. So you get some really, again, it's these things come and go. These themes and these styles. It's like anything else. Sometimes people like it. You know, again, all this stuff is an aesthetic choice. You know, again, this is just my way how I work. I like stepping back and zooming in to take advantage of any compression. Now, there's not too much compression in this background. It was just to help isolate her from against the background, the blackness back there. But the idea is you got to remember too, in portraits, you really want to have both eyes and both in the picture, or just the one eye. You never want to have a half an eye. So remember, and also regardless whatever lens you're using, make sure you always give yourself a little bit of a wiggle room, especially if you want to make a 4x6 later on or something like that.
You skipped on, but I thought there was beautiful light in that portrait that you
Oh,
took.
thank you. Thank you. Now, there isn't a perfect lens for landscapes. However, this is something I prefer, 100 millimeters to 200 millimeters with an f2.8 capability. I enjoy the compression effect. And again, you've heard me talk about this quite a bit. I love working with compression. You know, because again, playing around with compression and depth of field, you get some really interesting shots with stuff like that. I like doing it. It makes things a lot more interesting. Again, you can try it with a wide field of view or a telephoto field of view. Again, playing around with that gives you that unique look to your pictures, which is again something I try to do, especially with my landscapes. My idea with landscapes is that I too want to get something where people kind of feel they fall into the landscape, or they can kind of look at the landscape and kind of see how big the world really is with landscapes. The other thing too, I almost forget too, is that you can also get away with a slower shutter too with a wider field of view. I use that a lot when I'm dealing with astrophotography and stuff like that. Now, for those you see, when I talked about bokeh before, basically a small f-stop is usually what you get the bigger bokeh balls. but you don't have to have a large f-stop for that type of thing to get the bokeh balls. You just basically just need a amount of distance and a decent separation between the background and the foreground, and a lot of contrast to help pull in that detail. Small points of light being used against dark backgrounds. Regardless of the lens you use, you can always get something along like that. So yeah, there's some nice bokeh at 2.8. Sure, it's great. Works out really well. Even give her a catch lights, a little bit of bokeh, which is kind of nice. Not a problem. Works out really great. However, what if you have to shoot things that say at 6.7? Well, there's going to be bokeh no matter what. It just depends on how far the background is from the subject, or the focal plane, I should say. So in between these two pictures, though, I adjusted the focal plane. Didn't change anything. I didn't change the exposure. All I did was I just changed where I was focusing on. This glass ball was much, much closer to the camera. It was at the minimal focus distance where I could put it. And then I just basically changed it. So I'm focusing further away, and then the other one focusing close. Again, I'm getting a nice low bokeh effect, even though I'm shooting, say, at 6.7. It doesn't really matter as much as long as you've got some sort of distance and some contrast. Now, again, the bigger the aperture opening, the bigger these balls can get. But again, distance also plays that into there as well. Now, you got to remember too, I'm also playing around with the lighting in here. I've got a lot of different lighting effects. I got the sunset, I got this yellow light, and of course I got the light that's coming from here, you know, the main subject right there. So again, by moving everything around, I've got to pay attention to how the light's going to affect the picture as well too. I typically, as a rule, I shoot mostly in RAW so I can adjust my color temperature after I take it. However, if you don't do that, I can always say, if you want, I usually recommend, shoot things in daylight balance on the auto white balance. If you're shooting in the golden hour, the blue hour, you get much more accurate colors in the JPEG files, in my opinion, for that stuff. Again, distance. I can't stress how distance and things move around from this type of thing. Always try to move around with the depth of field to get that nice little transition between your subject and the background. So by moving myself without making any changes, I get a much more interesting result with the background versus with him. So again, it all depends on what you're doing. I didn't have to do anything else except I changed my focal length and I stepped back and I zoomed in. So I brought that out of focus field, the part of the background which is outside the depth of field, closer to the subject. All right, we kind of went through all that stuff. Now, when I'm dealing with editing and things like that, one of the things that I always do all the time is I'm usually doing a separation between the background and the foreground. And sometimes I have to shoot two pictures just for that alone. And so when I do that, I need to I'm trying to shoot this conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. This was a couple of years ago, and I'm at Casperson's Beach. I picked my foreground, but you can see it's getting fairly dark. Now I can use the flash to light it up, but I don't want to do that because I'm trying to keep the ambient light there as much as possible. So I need two exposures. I got to shoot one for the sky and I got to shoot one for the foreground. Now I did turn on a little bit of a low level light on the foreground right there. Now these are the JPEG files that were captured at that time. And these are the RAW files that I had that captured at the same time. The RAW files have more data in them. So when I'm dealing with extreme tonal ranges, I can actually use the RAW files to help rescue some of that detail that I would have lost if I was in JPEG. So again, this was a pretty easy edit. So all I had to do is basically, So basically all I had to do is go through hit the background and cut out the foreground a little bit. The background, and then with the divider of the horizon line. And that way I could put all that stuff together and do my blending and so forth and so forth. And that's pretty much how I get some of my shots these days, because I'm dealing with such extremes between the foreground and the background. Again, can you get this in one shot? Sure, you could probably do that if you do enough light painting. But then again, if you're doing that, you might get more motion blur with the stars. So again, it all depends on what you're trying to achieve with your results.
And Dono, the same thing for the moon. Because
Yes,
my wife and I have had a debate for years. Why can't you shoot the moon and the foreground? And
right.
it doesn't look the same. The moon is 100th of a second and the foreground is 60 seconds. So
Exactly.
it really helps to do two shots and blend them in Photoshop or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. So again, I do a lot of stitching because again, there's a number of reasons why I do this type of stuff. So I'm shooting this at f5 for all these pictures, but I'm focused in on the tower right there. So everything in the foreground is going to be slightly soft anyway. So I'm not too worried about that. However, I don't want to just, I could back up and probably do the same thing. But the issue that I run into, if I crop the one file, I only have X amount of data to work with. If I have 4 files, let's say these are all 20 megapixels. Well, now I have a picture that can have an approximately almost 20, 40, 60, 80 pixels worth of data to work through. And, even though I might crop some of it out, I'm creating a much more higher resolution image.
Yeah.
And that way I can get the picture that I want without having to sacrifice cropping it later on. And again, Photoshop is a great tool for this type of thing. There's other software out there, but that's what I generally do, is do it like that. I find the files, I use photo merge, and then I combine all the data together. And then once it's all done, it's kind of lining it up right there and how it puts it all together. There's a little bit of, since I'm freehanding it, there's a little bit of out of sync. But then again, it kind of fills in the data, and then you just do some quick edits to kind of fix it up a little bit.
That's very nice.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'm kind of running out of time here, and I haven't really seen too much in the chat thing. So I'm going to stop the share for right now. Oops, get out of the screen. Here we are. So anybody have any questions about anything that we kind of talked about at all tonight? I hope. Was any of this stuff helpful for you guys?
Always helpful for me, Dono.
Well, I appreciate that, Kevin. It's almost like we have the Kevin Dono show.
You're running it, and it's great that you do this. I tip my hat to you. So thank you, Dono.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Again, I want to apologize for to the people who might see this later on after I post it about having to change the date so much. Like I said, I had some personal family things I had to take care of and move through that. But that's all done, hopefully, and then we'll basically be able to move on from there. All right, guys.
I got a business question for you.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that Nikon's ever gonna sell that D850 back at the $24.99 price that they did on Black Friday last year? Because I've got the money put aside and I'm waiting for them, but
I don't know when they're coming out with another one. That's when they're coming. Where they're really putting everything into the Z series. Hang on, Kevin. Hang on, Mike. Wait. You gotta wait. Gotta wait. Come on. Kick back in. There we go.
You were good.
I didn't hear that last bit. I'm sorry, Kevin. I
maybe out of luck, but I was trying. If I could get it at that $2,500 price, I'd be a very happy guy. So we'll see. We'll see about that.
All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the session. So if nobody's got any questions, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great night, and thanks for stopping in.
Thank you, Dono. Have a great season.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. As always, I look forward to seeing everybody's results. Be safe, be well, and I hope you all take some really pretty pictures.